For a long time, I heard the saying, we are spiritual beings in a human experience. And I didn't really understand what that meant. As we've stepped into a spiritual journey, into what I call recovering your soul, this concept that we are not broken, we're actually remembering and recovering the aspects of ourselves that are bringing us back to wholeness, releasing us from a belief that we're separate from, that we're broken, or there's something wrong with us. We're actually recovering our souls. What if we started to look at everyone as souls? What if we started to look at a concept that maybe, just maybe, souls have been talked about for eons and many, many, many religions? But what if we started to think about the concept that as souls, we are coming here to have a human experience, to learn, to grow, to shift, to evolve, to awaken? Today, I'm talking about something that for some people might be pretty far out there, and I hope you'll just stay with me. Just give it a listen. Take what you need and leave the rest. But when you begin to recognize that we can begin to shift our perception, the way that we look at ourselves and the people around us, we might let go of trying to control everything. And in that letting go of control, we might find some freedom and some peace. And we might remember our own wholeness, and we might remember our own soul's journey. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Recover Your Soul podcast and community, a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. My name is Reverend Rachel Harrison. I started Recover Your Soul after having profound changes in my life from my recovery of alcoholism, codependency, people-pleasing, and control addiction. I was guided to share the tools and principles of spirituality and the Recover Your Soul process to help others transform their lives as mine was transformed. For us to overcome external circumstances, we need to turn the attention to ourselves, focusing on our inner change and healing. Positive results in our lives will follow. Welcome to Recover Your Soul. I'm Rev Rachel. I am so grateful to have you here with me today. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's new, people who are subscribing or following this podcast on whatever platform you hear it. I feel like the more that I do this work around spirituality and knowing that when we get clear about what we need or what our soul wants to learn, the more we just come across, however we find it, to exactly what we need at the exact right time. So if I am that for you, I am honored and privileged to be part of your life and part of your soul journey to healing and awakening. If you're part of the community that's been coming back for a while, again, I am just honored and privileged to be on this journey with you and to be walking alongside you. I'm not fully cooked yet. I don't have everything figured out, but man, is my life and myself profoundly changed from what it was before I got sober in 2018 and really took myself and my life and my soul more seriously. I wanted to talk today about souls. And I wanted to talk about souls because it's really been such a huge part of where I've shifted from. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've been with me for all 6 years. I started in May of 2020. And at that time, I was just a couple of years sober. I had been a spiritual person my whole life. I was raised Buddhist. I've been going to a unity church, but I was limited in what I was taking in because I was in fight, flight, or freeze. I was in that place in life that is just filled and with wrecked was the word that's coming to me, just wrecked and rattled with the unmanageability, with the chaos, with the dysfunctions, with addiction on my end, on my husband's end, on my kids' end, and that just survival, just pure trying to make it from one day to the next survival. And many of you are probably in that state. And I get it. I get it 100%. To live outside of sort of some of the basics that I was receiving from the Unity Church I attended and from the Buddhism that I was raised with, and I was reading spiritual books. We would do spiritual book studies at the spiritual center that I attended. I was taking in the information, but it was as if it was going into some bank in my head, some library. I was shelving the books, right? I was taking in the information. I was shelving the books, but I wasn't demonstrating or applying it deeply because I was just in the mix of what it is to be alive and to survive, and sometimes to check the hell out and be asleep. So when this shift happened and I got sober and I started to open my eyes a little bit and look a little bit broader beyond what was going on, a big piece of that was in reading and studying A Course in Miracles. Now, I had done a lot of, like I said, a lot of putting those books on the shelf, on the spiritual bookshelf of my mind. But it was the Course in Miracles that broke something open in me. And it's hard to describe because I don't think it has to be the Course in Miracles. I think it can be a myriad of spiritual literature. And maybe it's me for you. And I'm just honored if that's the case, that opens up our concepts just a little bit. It's like the door opens to what could be more. And the way that the Course in Miracles started to talk about our separation from the divine and started to talk about how we can be present in our experience was a shift for me, a perception. And we talk a lot about that in Recover Your Soul, that we're changing our perception. There's no place that you can be that's wrong. There's not a single experience or place that you can be that is a quote unquote wrong place. It is just an is. It is a place where you are on your development. And the more I've grown and shifted, and what A Course in Miracles opened me up to was to see differently. In the very beginning of the workbook in the Course in Miracles, the first pieces say what you see is limited by the perception in which you have taken in. It starts with, I am seeing this cup, this table, this chair, but I am choosing to see it, or I see it from a limited perspective. So it began to open up to what you see is what you choose to see. It all goes through your own perception, your own mind. So can you open up to something else? In October 2019, when I was driving in the pickup truck with Rich and Bodie, driving to California for our camping trip that year on the beach, and I'm telling Bodie about this thing that I'm being drawn to do, which I wasn't sure what was it going to be, a blog or a podcast, or I didn't know. Had no idea what I was being called to, but I was being called to something and I was following that call. And he's guiding me through, what do you want to call it and what do you want to do? He was going to college for marketing, so he had a lot of really great questions. And the word Recover Your Soul came. And I continue just to be astounded with the gift of those 3 words. And it wasn't saying, here's your business model, here's your brand, it was a call to me, Rachel, recover your soul, your soul. And that led me, without my understanding or knowing, it was guiding me to a way to see myself and the world around me and the people in my life from an entirely different vantage point. Not from who we are here, but from our soul's perspective, a higher perception of this view of ourselves. And so for the last 6 years in particular, I have been on a spiritual whirlwind. I have gone so far out there. And I just really want to say, again, take what you need and leave the rest. I am never saying, I've figured it all out. Here's all the answers. Here's what you should do. Here's how you should see it. I don't think of that at all. As a matter of fact, the more spirituality that I do, the more that I study, the less I quote unquote know. The less I can say for sure what I think is. And the more it opens up to, it's hard to describe. It's ineffable. It's the concepts that come, the awarenesses that come are just so much. But what has become clear to me, and again, take what you want and or need or resonate with and leave the rest. I started to really see, especially when I studied to be a metaphysical minister and started studying more religions and traditions and philosophies. Souls are in everything. Souls are in everything. They're spoken about in many different ways, and there's lots of different ways that we talk about what happens after or between or before. And that's really for each person to make their own determination and to connect to their own understanding around that. But this idea that there is a foundational belief that there is something more than just what we are here in body. And I think this is the part that has given me more and more strength as time has gone by. It's like in the beginning, I think I was afraid to really talk about the souls, maybe because I wasn't understanding it as clear as I do now. And if you listen to the beginning years of the podcast, I was still just in the mix of it. I mean, huge. My kids were still really struggling with their own stuff. My older son's addiction was off the charts. He was having a really, really hard time in his life. And I was going to Al-Anon as the way just to hold on to myself, just to be able to make it through the day, and my own recovery in AA, working the steps diligently. That's what the whole Recover Your Soul book is about. But I was shifting and changing within myself and starting to be willing to walk through that door that opened up that just said, can you trust that there's more? Can you trust that you came here to recover your soul, to remember your soul self? And as I've done that, I've gotten more and more and more information about our soul and our experience. And the people who are now in this community, because the community has shifted, as I have shifted over time, are interested in these soul concepts. And so the more that I move into these concepts of the soul, so a soul in human form, a lot of people believe that we reincarnate over and over and over again and have the capacity within each incarnation. Buddhism calls it karma, to clean up, to move through, to shift through the imprints that happen, and each experience creates an imprint from those emotional resonances, those emotional interchanges that happen. And what we're basically doing is we're constantly in this movement to grow and shift and change and expand and learn from the experience in which it is to be here in body. And growing more and more into this, part of me worries about talking about it, right? Part of me is like, oh, people are going to judge you and they're going to think you're crazy. And who do you think you are? Oh my gosh, right? Those are what we learn in step 3. Those are the limiting beliefs, patterns, and stories that go into don't be judged, don't get in trouble, don't say anything outside of the norms. Again, be small, be quiet, be still. One of the things that we're practicing in this new paradigm of the Great Awakening and the shift into this higher consciousness is to go for it. To go for it. Why not? What are you going to lose in going for it? And as a matter of fact, this is the part that I think the soul comes into play, which is the soul is saying, why be small? If we've been incarnating and going through this karmic part of ourselves of trying to kind of clean up and learn from and adjust from and have this challenge, and then that challenge gives you another challenge to work on, to learn from this one, from this angle, from that angle. Something's happening right now where we are shifting into an entirely different way of being. And we don't have to learn from this tiny micro steps, but we can start making huge leaps and bounds because we have more and more access to a larger wisdom and collective consciousness that is now available to everyone in this new era. So what does that mean? What does that mean, Rachel? Okay, that's great. That's interesting. What does that mean? I think what it means is that in the end, we start taking responsibility for ourselves and for the choices in which we make in our own life, and stop playing the victim, stop being in a place of powerlessness and taking your power back, and realizing that you have choice in every moment of what you're doing for your soul, for your soul. And part of what we're doing is we're breaking a cycle that had come through, that had been around disempowerment. And it was around control and dysfunction and over responsibility, massive codependency for years and years and years and years of like taking care of everybody else and being responsible for everybody. And that created this indention, this replay, this output of roles and how we all interact with each other. And I think we're being given right now more and more and more opportunity to take responsibility for our own souls and our own journeys. So what's funny is when I started this podcast, I was thinking I was going to talk about this past weekend with my parents, and how do we live in life? How do you start seeing the people in your life as souls? And a lot of this, people get a lot of help in how they're dealing with their adult children with this concept to remember they're on their own soul's journey. They're on their own soul's journey. And as you're watching them make decisions or struggle with things, that was in last time's podcast, to remember that they're entitled to their own journey. Well, today I actually want to talk a little bit about seeing the people in your life through the eyes of your soul to their soul. That there's this shift that can happen in our journey where we stop interacting with the people in our life from their incarnated, wounded self that has a lot of play around their unhealed parts. And we all have unhealed parts, but you're actively working right now. If you're here listening to this podcast and you're in this community and you're working the recovery soul steps in whatever form that looks like for you, whether you're doing it with me online or coaching or just got the free workbook and you're doing it on your own, it doesn't matter because your soul knows the way. I am not here to give you something you don't have for yourself. But when you start really recognizing that as a soul interacting with other souls, you can either continue to wound and continue this imprint of karma that is going to take a long time to work out because we continue to play off of these dysfunctional relationships with each other. And those dysfunctional relationships continue to create wounds. And then we're in this long game play of how we're going to eventually, slowly, through however many incarnations or however many layers of work you need to do to heal your own wounds, or you can stop the outer wounding by being as clean and clear and as healed and as awake as you can in your own experience and witnessing the people around you for their experience and letting go of the control that thinks that you are responsible for them in any facet of what they are doing in their own body as a soul. And it doesn't mean that you don't show up and do stuff. So that brings me to this weekend with my parents. Thank God my parents are still friends. They've been friends the whole time. My parents separated when I was around 7 or 8, and they both had a conscious decoupling. I think we call it conscious decoupling, where they just realized they weren't aligned and they had issues in their marriage. My dad had affairs and my mom didn't really want to be a poor, starving hippie anymore. So it wasn't like they didn't have stuff. They definitely had stuff, but they, with kindness and love for each other, worked really hard on reconnecting their marriage, sat in their marriage as it was, and both said, you know what? It just doesn't align for me. This way that it is, we can't each be our fullest self in our union together. And they demonstrated that really beautifully for me, because they were such great friends from the very start. So when my parents divorced, we still all hung out together. We've done holidays and trips and everything together this whole time. And yet, as we always do with our parents, there is woundedness that happens when you are a child from your parents, no matter what it is. No matter how hard someone's trying to be their best self or even to be their best parent, there will always be stuff that comes. So even though my parents were good friends and things went the way that they did, I had my own life as a child that created the beliefs, patterns, and stories that I have around massive codependency stuff about not thinking I could ask for what I wanted, feeling like I had to play the good girl to try to make sure everything was easy for my mom, and really desperate for attention from my dad, who was just doing his thing, just being a hippie singer, songwriter, silversmith, human being, right? Like doing his thing. Always had some different girlfriend. And it created in me the parts of me that were here for me to work on. And I think that's the part of the soul journey that we need to take responsibility for. If we stop thinking that the world happens to us and that we are being victimized by the world. I'm like this because my dad was like this. I'm like this because my mom was like this. What if we switched it and empowered ourselves and said, I am a soul who, whatever layer
of belief systems you have, of how much you decide. Some belief systems are, as a soul, you make contracts beforehand and you say, you're going to be my father and my mother, and we're going to have this kind of situation, and I'm going to learn this kind of a lesson, and you're going to take this kind of a role. And some of those pickings is really intense stuff. And so people are saying, why the heck would I choose to be raised by an alcoholic father who beat me? That's a really good question. And I'm not here to say that there's like I picked it and it's the bed you made, and so you should lay in it. I'm here to say that as souls, potentially we choose some very complicated situations and feelings that maybe we don't understand the depth of the heartache and the suffering that is caused and felt when we're here in those situations. And that some of those things just happen because the people who are in their experience, still in their woundedness, don't remember their souls. They're in their bodies and they're in their wounded and they're in their pain. And they haven't had enough energy or enough dedication or enough work within themselves to finally break free from some of these very dense, painful, complicated patterns and stories. But if we empower ourselves to say, on some level, my soul knew that I could handle it, that whatever this was, whatever this is, to feel these experiences, to be in this very dense, they say Earth is the most dense, complicated of all of the schools, of all the spiritual planet schools, all the ways of being. And again, take what you need and leave the rest. That we actually get to feel the feelings that include very painful, difficult, complex feelings. And in those experiences where you can be present in yourself, where you can be present in yourself as a soul, in body, having a complete breakdown, having a moment in your life where you just think, I can't possibly survive, but you do. But you do, and you make it past, and you understand more about yourself, and you let go of those old beliefs, and you remember how strong you are. That is one of the most incredible gifts that you can give yourself as an eternal soul, as a part of something even greater still. This shift that I've made in these 6 years, from somebody who didn't want to wake up in the morning, didn't want to be alive, was in a really hard, complicated marriage, kids that were really suffering from us and who we were and how we were showing up. Even to feel this feeling, if you can see it as a gift, is a gift. Because when we can allow ourselves to move through and to be present in ourselves from a witnessed perspective, and to see the incredible complexity in which we experience everything, and how layered that warp and weft is in our tapestry of all of our beings and all of our souls and all of our experiences and all of our choices.
We'll be right back.
Recover Your Soul is so much more than just this podcast. It's a community, and it also is a 9-step process to healing and awakening. It offers a way to be in the world in a new way, letting go of old beliefs, old patterns, old systems through a spiritual path that brings you to your awakened wholeness, to be able to be present in very complicated situations and relationships. We're letting go of codependency and people pleasing, and maybe even having people in our lives who are affected by addiction. We are learning how to be in a different way of being through these very sticky and complicated times. If you're ready to recover your soul, the Self-Study Collective is the place to start. It's only $44 a month. No pressure to stay. Come get what you need. Stay as long as you'd like. It's where I teach the 9-step process through self-study plus 2 live teachings a month alongside a community of people who are doing the same deep work. And if you're a parent of an adult child, we also have a soul circle just for that, twice a month with group coaching, learning how to use the Recover Your Soul process and be in a new way with your adult children children. There's other paths too, including one-on-one coaching, retreats, the book, our free monthly support group the first Monday of every month, and you'll find it all at the Recover Your Soul website. And if you're nodding and thinking, yeah, I want to do this, then start with the free 9-step Recover Your Soul mini workbook. Everything that you can find at recoveryoursoul.net. Together, we can do the work that will recover your soul.
That when you stand in that and you take responsibility for yourself and your own soul, and you begin to see everybody else's experiences through the eyes of them being souls, and that soul can never be harmed. That soul is beyond what it feels like to be here. It holds an essence of love and wholeness that we are being offered to come back to remember through this complexity. We're being offered this opportunity to come back and remember our wholeness, because from that moment of just being washed into emotion to coming back into my heart and coming back into the place where I can see the incredible hero's journey, the wild ride that it is to be, and how opening up to these new concepts and these new ideas and seeing beyond our human condition makes us so incredible, really. Brings me back to A Course in Miracles, which is that we are not separate from. We are not separate from. It's an entirely different podcast than I thought I was making. What happened this past weekend was I showed up to help my dad, who's 85 years old, with my mom. And he has been gathering treasures his whole life. And those treasures are really props for a story. That's what he called them. He is a storyteller. And he has gathered these stories of not only his own life, but of the life of everybody he's ever met. And he has archived and memorized these stories that include incredible details, dates, names. He's amazing. And that's his passion. I feel like maybe in some other lifetime, he was a bard. You know, he just went from town to town and sang and told the stories and kept the history going, because that's what he's like. When you're around him, he will tell stories. And, you know, he tells stories not in the way that I've told the stories in the podcast that I have. They're not about feelings. They're about adventure. They're about the depth of experience that we each have. And it gave me great insight on this past weekend, because I brought a gentleman who owns a vintage shop here in Louisville, Colorado, with me to come up and see my dad's stuff and buy some stuff. And so my dad kind of had this audience, you know, to share his belongings and tell the stories about all these belongings. And I watched him in a new way. I watched him from a more healed me that wasn't wanting from or looking for healing from the wounds that were part of my experience and growing up, and even as an adult in my relationships with my parents and with my dad in particular. I watched him through the eyes of my soul to the eyes of his soul. And it let go of a lot of that stigma or wanting, right, of what we want people to be and how we want people to show up. And I think there's this real opportunity for us, especially with the people in our lives, with the people that we love so much, to recognize that it only makes sense that we would run everything through, as I talked about in the beginning, through our operating system, through how we choose to see it. And that we project, right? We project what we think from our mind onto that situation, onto that person. And in this process of spiritual awakening, we're cleaning up our own projector so that you can witness somebody without judgment, without all the pretense of who they're supposed to be or how they're supposed to show up. I think sometimes in my life in the past, when my dad starts telling a million stories, it kind of felt like, well, where's the space for the rest of us? Like, how do we have a conversation if you're telling the stories? But this time I just thought, that's me not being willing for my own stuff to insert myself, because that's a little girl who watched and made a decision a long time ago about what this experience felt or looked like or what my role was. And so every time I show up, when I think that, I'm actually thinking that from a younger self who is trying to find her space in it. He's not trying to take up all the space. He's just being himself, right? And so when you start looking at people through the eyes of the soul, at their human experience, at their wild ride, and how they've chosen to be in their experience, you're actually giving them responsibility back to be who they are and to see cleanly the parts that are actually kind of the cool parts, and maybe the parts that sometimes aren't all that great, but to quit thinking you have to fix or be responsible for any of those things. So part of the reason why we are doing this is because my dad's 85. If he has all these treasures and he has limited resources, I certainly don't need or want to be the one to be going through and selling and getting stuff taken care of after he's gone. I want him to get the resources and to be able to tell the stories of all these treasures that he's had now while he's alive. And that's really important to me. And so when I went and just like took this weekend to kind of just look at his life, for the life that he created for himself, which has complexity to it, like all of our lives do. But it also has this great gift of just sort of seeing who he is 85 years in and having him touch these items that he owns and fill the air with his words and his stories. And I was joking with him that I was like, less stories, more sorting, Dad. We're trying to get through this stuff. And him saying they're not things, they're just props for the story. And then I realized, the beauty of this weekend, or anybody that he ends up selling things to and giving them the story, is they're not only getting the thing, but they're also getting the story, which is his soul's journey to be the keeper, the record keeper of all these experiences and all these lives in a way that's not me. I communicate and speak in the nows. I want to talk about how are you feeling now? What's going on in your life right now? And what are you working on inside of your heart? And what are you thinking? What are you feeling? That's how I communicate. That's not at all how my dad communicates. He communicates in these gathering of stories. And that was helpful too, just to be reminded that we each get to show up in exactly who we are, in the way that we work with the world, and that our souls are doing our own journey with ourselves, and that any imprints, we are responsible for our own imprint. We're responsible for that part of ourself that makes choices out of woundedness to continue a wound. Or we have the responsibility and the capacity to switch and change and heal and to release so much of this continued woundedness that we have of people, and witness and watch and be present with people in their lives without the judgment, without the projection, without the wanting, so that you can actually have more clarity and clean communication and ask for what you need when there needs to be one of those discussions. And part of the weekend was having some of those discussions. There was things I wanted to say to him around end of life stuff, or what my responsibilities were, or, don't leave anything left unsaid. And some of them are clunky, and sometimes I don't feel all that great having those conversations, or I don't really know how to say it all the right way. But if I do it from my most healed place, there's less capacity for it to imprint an additional wound, and more capacity for it to clean up something between us, some of our karma. Lastly, one of the things that I heard, and I can't remember if I said this on the podcast before, speaking of souls, I know I went really long today, I heard somebody say that if you have a really hard time with somebody, maybe you have a sister or a parent or a kid or a family member or a friend or a coworker, generally it's our family members, that you really, really, really struggle with. If you want to clean up that relationship and you don't want to be incarnated with them again, right? It is not about cleaning up the relationship between the two of you in human form, in conversation with them, in a way that the relationship looks on the outside. Because that could incur more imprints, more samskara, it's called in Sanskrit, more of these wounds, because you're dancing with each other's woundedness and unhealed parts and those parts of us that we're working in Recover Your Soul on transforming into our more awakened space. You do the work inside you. You do the work inside of you to understand and to see them on their soul's journey, to understand that they may or may not have the capacity to be present for you in the way that you need, want, desire, and that you stop having resentments and anger and upset and continued negative grievances and reactions to them. And you look to yourself and you say, what is this showing me? If this is one of those soul contracts, then their scratchiness is an opportunity for you to look at yourself. So are you going to take that and look at yourself and do something within yourself? And if you are, what are you going to do about it for you? Because what it could mean is that you don't have a relationship with them at all on the outside. But inside, you're working on compassion. On the inside, you're working on forgiveness. On the inside, you're working on allowing it to reveal those parts of yourself that need healing, that need to be loved by yourself, that need to have compassion for yourself. Those are the parts that you're actually being given an opportunity and a gift to recognize can be healed within you. And then when you have clarity within yourself, that is healed. That soul relationship is healed. And again, it may still look kind of funky on the outside from the human perspective. And it certainly does not mean that you invite them over for dinner or you try to continue to be friends with them or you continue to try to have, some sort of chummy relationship. What it actually means is that you care about yourself enough to know what boundaries there are. But inside of yourself, you are not filled with grievance and resentment and anger. You can have compassion for the soul. And you can have compassion for their experience as who they are here and stop fighting whatever that relationship is. That, they say, cleans that soul contract so that you don't have to do another layer with them. They are responsible for their soul's journey. You don't have to clean up for both of you. You're just cleaning up for you. So this past weekend, I feel like was all about me and me continuing to do work on myself and heal those parts of myself and heal the part of myself that feels like, for whatever reason, because my parents certainly never, ever, ever say this or make it want to be so. They both love me immensely. But somehow I'm having to remind myself that I have permission to be who I am becoming, who my soul self is becoming, that may look and feel very different in some ways to who they used to think I was or felt comfortable with or have their own memories of who I should be. That's all me making some sort of assumption that that's the case. I have to be the one that can be comfortable in my own skin, show up 100% as myself, be able to have conversations that feel hard or sticky, or release the ones that you think that you want to have, the conversations you think that you should have, and work on this soul internal journey of healing and awakening and releasing. And at every step, you're more bound to your soul's journey and its healing and awakening and being present for yourself so that you can witness and watch your life here in body from your soul and listen to that higher self, that soul self, that is always guiding you towards healing, towards enoughness. And be curious about everybody else's journeys and letting them go to do their own journeys. It's kind of far out there. I totally get it. So if this is kind of new stuff to you, take in some tiny little parts. If something resonated a little bit, if you're more interested, there's lots of really awesome, awesome stuff out there about souls, about reincarnation, about life between lives, about so much that's becoming more and more open to talk about and think about. And then you can even look in religions and see how souls have been talked about for a long time, and that this isn't as crazy as maybe it was even 10 years ago. So we are recovering our souls. We are recovering those parts of ourselves, those aspects of ourselves that we have sent away out of fear, out of pain, and we're recovering them and we're bringing them back into our wholeness. And I think that's what the guidance was when Spirit gave me those words. It wasn't about addiction and recovery. I thought it was. It's about recovering ourselves, our souls, our essence, our being, to remember our wholeness, to remember our divine nature, to live for our soul's true purpose. And in that place, whew, man, it's pretty incredible. Thanks for being here with me on this little bit longer episode that kind of went far out there. I love you all so much. Until next time, namaste.
Thank you for listening, and I hope that this supported you in some way to live a happy and healthy life. We are in a process of releasing what no longer serves us and stepping into our wholeness. If you're interested in working the Recover Your Soul steps in your own life, I encourage you to visit recoveryoursoul.net to learn about all of the ways that you can become involved in the community and work the steps. My first invitation is to get the free 9-step mini workbook that'll help you get started. And if you decide that you want more, the Recover Your Soul Self-Study Collective is a perfect place to start. It's where you can do the modules all on your own and still meet with me twice a month for live teachings, questions, and answers, and be in connection with community. I also invite you to join me on the free first Monday of every month support group on Zoom, where we get together from 6 to 7 p.m. Mountain Time to connect as a community. On the website, you can find offerings that include one-on-one coaching, retreats, social media, every way that you can connect more with the Recover Your Soul process, because together we can do the work that will recover your soul. The Recover Your Soul podcast courses and content is for educational purposes only and is not affiliated with or representative of any organization, recovery group, or religion, and reflect the personal experience and opinions of Rev. Rachel Harrison and her guests. Recover Your Soul claims no responsibility any person or entity for any loss, liability, damage caused or alleged to be caused direct or indirectly by the use, application, or interpretation of the information presented within. Take what you need and leave the rest.